Who doesn't know that Ryan, the big shot in the Beijing circle, has a girl he dotes on? Except for me. On the wedding day, the girl wore a white wedding dress and looked at me provocatively. You marrying Ryan doesn't change anything. I'm still the woman he loves the most. Hearing this, the corners of my mouth slightly curled up. I turned my head and slapped Ryan across the face. 01 On the wedding day, Ava was wearing a white wedding dress. She stood in front of me in front of everyone and looked at me provocatively. The one who isn't loved is the mistress. You marrying Ryan doesn't change anything. I'm still the woman he loves the most. At that time, the wedding hadn't started yet, but the backstage was full of people. Among them were many young heirs of wealthy families with high status in Beijing. They looked at each other, but none of them dared to step forward to stop it. There was no other reason. Everyone knew that Ryan, the big shot in the Beijing circle, had a girl he doted on. The girl was spoiled in every way, just like the heroine in a novel, pampered by everyone in Ryan's family. Even though I was Ryan's wife now, I was just a decoration for a business marriage. I couldn't be compared with the woman Ryan loved at all. The backstage was silent. Ryan walked forward surrounded by a group of people, with a cold expression. When he saw Ava, his eyes became as soft as the spring water that had just thawed. When he turned to me again, his face was still as cold as frost. What are you standing here for? The wedding is about to start. I sneered and looked up at Ava. Do you dare to repeat what you just said? Ava sneered and repeated those words loudly word for word. Before she could finish speaking, I swung my arm and slapped her across the face. I had been working out for years and had great arm strength. With just one slap, Ava's small face immediately turned blue. A drop of nosebleed slowly flowed out of her nose, ruining her plain makeup, and it even looked a bit comical. Ava seemed to be in a daze. She covered her face and stared at me blankly. I sneered and slapped her on both cheeks several times. I was hitting the woman Ryan loved the most. When I was about to raise my hand again, Ryan finally reacted and grabbed my raised hand. Serena. Have you had enough? Yuan is still a child. Do you have to hit her just because she said a few childish words? She's a child but you're still flirting with her? Are you a pervert? After he finished speaking, I sneered and turned to look at Ryan. Ryan frowned as he looked at me. The next second, I raised my other hand and slapped Ryan hard again. I sneered as I looked at Ryan's swollen face. You probably don't know that I'm known as the Chinese version of Juju, and my nickname is the God of Slaps. After saying that, I pushed Ryan away and pointed at his nose and cursed loudly. I spent 1.5 billion on this business marriage with you. Are you trying to play the kept woman story on me? You old thing, you dirty old man, wanting to sleep with a young girl and calling it a nurturing story. How fucking disgusting. After saying that, I threw the bouquet in Ryan's face. If this mess isn't cleaned up today, no one is allowed to let the wedding continue. Do you think I'm eager to marry you? The people chasing me can line up from here to France. Do you think you have the right to be picky here? If your old man hadn't come to beg me and almost knelt down, do you think you would have had the chance to marry me? Fuck you. After saying that, I yanked off the white veil on my head and swaggered out of the backstage. 02 My mother was waiting in the dressing room. When she saw me coming, she smiled and gave me a thumbs up. You're really something, my daughter. So domineering. I sneered and sat down on the sofa with a thud, crossing my legs. I had been fighting in the business world for years and I wasn't stupid. Ryan's family let Ava humiliate me in public. It was just a test of obedience. Ryan's family was a wealthy and noble family in Beijing with a very high status. However, in recent years, because they couldn't keep up with the trend of the times, the Ryan family's group had declined and their income was weak. In order to attract funds, they had to have a business marriage. And I, a woman with money but no background, was the best choice. They coveted my billions of dowry but couldn't bring themselves to beg me. So they simply wanted to play the good guy while doing bad things and tried to PUA me. They used their noble status to suppress me. They wanted me, the nouveau riche, to think that I was inferior and finally hold my dowry in both hands and begged them to take it. Thinking of this, I sneered. It's so ridiculous. Even a dog would shake its head at such a bold and shameless act. They had a good plan but they didn't expect that I wasn't a soft persimmon that anyone could squeeze. I was like a piece of explosive coal. I was raised by my mother since I was a child. My mother caught the fast train at the beginning of the reform and opening up. Back then, she started from a steel factory by partnering with a few people on her own and later invested in the internet and managed to accumulate a huge fortune. And I was even better than her. I made a name for myself abroad at a young age. Many famous clothing brands on the market now are subsidiaries under me. The business world is like a battlefield. People who can survive in the business world are no ordinary people. Both my mother and I were excellent at quarreling. If it weren't for wanting to make a name for myself in the vast domestic market, I would never have married Ryan. I looked down on Ryan from the bottom of my heart. My mother's assistant was undercover at the scene. The assistant said that now Ryan's grandmother had come and they couldn't figure out a solution for a while, so she asked us to wait in the dressing room first. There were melon seeds and snacks in the dressing room, so my mother and I simply sat on the sofa, eating melon seeds and cursing Ryan loudly. In this society, as long as women are a little bit weak, men will take advantage of them. My mother and I had been struggling in the business world for years, so of course we knew this truth. Therefore, we both had a fierce temper and could raise our voices when necessary. We knew that there were people from Ryan's family eavesdropping at the door of the dressing room, so we simply cursed as loudly as we could. My mother came from the common people and she was even better at cursing. She shrieked and cursed with all kinds of tricks, thoroughly scolding all of Ryan's ancestors. I added fuel to the fire beside her. We cursed for half an hour until we heard the people outside couldn't bear it anymore and threw something and left. My mother took a sip of tea leisurely and said in a sarcastic tone, "I didn't expect they couldn't take it. If you knew you couldn't take it, you shouldn't have brought that little bitch to the wedding. Isn't this just asking for a scolding?" I smiled and twirled the ring on my finger. "They're just cheap. I heard that everyone in Ryan's family is a masochist. The more you curse them, the more obedient they'll be." My mother deeply agreed and nodded to approve of my comment. Another half an hour passed, and still no one came. I knew that Ryan's family couldn't swallow their pride. They didn't want to put down their noble status and beg of nouveau riche with a low status. The message alert sounded, and I picked up my phone. It was a message from Ryan's grandmother, asking me to forgive Ryan for her sake and come to the wedding. I immediately sneered. "Your sake? Your sake is just like a pile of dog shit. You don't want to come and apologize to me, right? Then we'll fight to the end." I looked at the time and decisively made a call to Ryan. When the call was connected, I could tell that Ryan had put it on speakerphone. Before Ryan could say anything, I said, "Ryan, I'll give you 5 minutes. You big bitch, bring the little bitch you keep by your side and come to apologize to me in person. If you don't come, I remember that you recently found a financial big shot to help you manage your assets. Don't forget that my base is abroad and my fund business is decent. From now on, if you dare to be late, I'll be your opponent tonight. If you short sell, I'll long buy. If you long buy, I'll short sell. Anyway, I have plenty of money and I'm not afraid of losing money. If you're 1 minute late, I'll make you lose 10 million. I mean what I say." After saying that, I hung up the phone directly without caring about the shouts from the other side. 3 minutes later, hurried footsteps came from outside the dressing room, and the door was suddenly opened. It was Ryan and Ava. I sat on the sofa with my legs crossed, watching Ryan walk forward reluctantly. When he lowered his head and gave in, I then looked at Ava. The girl's face was bruised and swollen, like a dying workshop. I put on a fake smile. Yuan, I know you're just a child and you don't know how to control your words. I can understand that. It doesn't matter. After I enter Ryan's family, I'll teach you slowly." After saying that, I took out a stack of money from my handbag. "You're the child Ryan keeps by his side, so naturally I'm your stepmother. Call me Mom, and Mom will give you the fee for changing your address." After saying that, Ava suddenly raised her head and looked at Ryan with tears all over her face. I smiled at Ava. After a while, Ava gritted her teeth, with a hateful look in her eyes, but she had to lower her head. "Mother." I smiled and threw the stack of money in her face. "Good girl. What Mom likes the most is a girl with self-respect. Learn from Mom more in future. Don't be full of thoughts about men. That's being obsessed with romantic relationships, which is simply being crazy and needs to be cured." After saying that, I stood up gracefully, patted the non-existent dust on my body, and smiled as I turned to Ryan. "What are you standing there for, Ryan? Let's go." The wedding ended successfully, and I, Serena, became famous among the upper class in Beijing. Slapping the adopted daughter and the husband at the wedding scene, and they were from a wealthy family. What an achievement! Everyone said that I was really something. They originally wanted to put me in my place in front of everyone, but who knew that I fought back and stuffed the shit they threw at me right back into their own mouths. I didn't care what the outside world said. I only knew that I had become the young mistress of Ryan's family. On the wedding night, Ryan came to the bedroom with a face as black as the bottom of a pot. "Serena, I'm telling you. You may have my body now but you'll never have my heart." I sneered and kicked him out of bed. "Who would want a body like yours which is as disgusting as a white pig? Just looking at it makes me, who has a weak stomach for pork, feel sick. Get out." The next day, when I got up refreshed, the first thing I did was to call the servants in the mansion together. The butler stood in the middle. I looked him up and down and suddenly smiled. "Who pays your salary now?" The butler replied respectfully, "It's you, young mistress." It seemed that he was quite sensible. After he finished speaking, I picked up the teacup and stirred the tea foam on it. "Since you know who feeds you, don't be ungrateful. Be careful that I fire you all later. Let's see if those old guys will still want you." After saying that, I looked up and saw several young servants shrinking back and lowering their heads even lower. When the servants had all left, I looked up and saw Ryan standing on the second floor, frowning as he looked at me. I put the teacup on the table and said slowly, "If you have something to say, come down. I hate looking up at others." Hearing this, Ryan walked down the stairs with 2 dark circles under his eyes. The young master hadn't slept on the floor before. It didn't matter. He would get used to it if he slept on it often in the future. Ryan's voice was cold and hard. "Serena, why do you have to be so ruthless?" I raised my eyebrows. "What do you mean by being ruthless?" "This is called staff training. If they listen to me and fulfill their responsibilities as employees, of course I won't be stingy. Rewarding the good and punishing the bad, that's the basic logic of doing business. You've been in charge of Ryan's family for so long. Haven't you learned this yet?" Seeing my mocking look, Ryan took a deep breath and changed the topic. "When will you give me that 1.5 billion? I was amused and asked him back. "Why should I give you my dowry? Did you give me the betrothal gift? Why are you asking me for my dowry? What do you want my dowry for?" Seeing my 3 consecutive questions, Ryan clenched his fists and said in a low voice. "Ryan's family is having some difficulties recently. We're short of funds and need your dowry. As for the betrothal gift, we owe you an apology." I immediately sneered. "Just an ambiguous 'I'm sorry,' and you want 1.5 billion from me? Dream on." I crossed my legs and leaned back on the sofa, smiling. "You want my dowry? Fine. But for every sum of money you invest and every sum of capital you inject into Ryan's family, it has to go through my people. Every business move you make has to be reviewed by my assistant in advance." After I finished speaking, Ryan, who had suppressed his anger for so long, finally exploded. "Serena, don't go too far. I've never seen a woman as mean as you." Seeing him get angry, I threw the teacup on the ground. Smash. I stared at Ryan fixedly. "Ryan, you're so fucking double-faced. When your Ryan family was stingy and didn't let me use your resources and connections, you didn't say a word. Now it's my turn, and you say I'm mean? I'm telling you, for a business marriage, if you want to cooperate, exchange resources and help each other, I have no problem. But if you want to freeload off me, I'd like to see how many lives you have to dare to do such a stupid thing." After saying that, I stood up and looked down at him. "I know you like gentle women. But your liking is no different from dog shit to me. Think carefully about your own business value and show your sincerity before coming to me for cooperation." After saying that, I left Ryan behind, picked up the bag handed to me by the butler, and walked out of the door. 05 I'm not a pampered wealthy wife who just enjoys a life of leisure. I have my own career and don't have time to be a decorative vase in the Ryan family. I've put a lot of effort into the Beijing branch of the Maxwell family recently. Originally, the marriage with the Ryan family was to expand my network. Now that I've achieved my goal, I naturally have to focus on developing my business. After I gave Ryan a warning this morning, my work in Beijing has been going much more smoothly. Seeing the sincerity of the Ryan family, I'm not stingy either. With a wave of my hand, I invested a sum of money in the Ryan family. After all, I'm now also a shareholder of the Ryan family, and we are in a situation where we either thrive together or decline together. However, there are prerequisites for the investment. To prevent the Ryan family from misusing my money, I specifically sent Ryan a contract. If the Ryan family fails to reach the profit target I set within 3 months, my follow-up investment won't be continued. I heard from my assistant that Ryan got really angry in his office after receiving the contract. But what does it matter? Anyway, he finally agreed to my requirements. When my assistant brought me the contract, she looked worried. "President Maxwell, are we being a bit too harsh by pushing them so hard?" I flicked the contract with satisfaction and smiled. "Becky, you're still young. Don't you know that when dealing with the Ryan family, you have to be this tough? They look down on me, my background, and even my gender. In today's society, the requirements for women are too harsh. Women must be gentle and submissive. As long as they show traits that belong to men, people will immediately say that they are restless and will never get married. Even what I'm doing now is just the most normal business behavior. But even so, Ryan thinks that I'm being too pushy and that I'm not a good woman. Fuck the so-called good woman." Under my tough policy, the big ship of the Ryan family group finally started to move slowly. Ryan was afraid that I wouldn't invest in the Ryan family, so he worked hard and tried to innovate in the Ryan family. There were a lot of changes among the senior management, and the internal situation was in turmoil. Every night, Ryan didn't come back until late night. 06 It wasn't until the construction of my company's Beijing branch was settled that I remembered that I had an adopted daughter like Ava. The butler told me that Ava's birthday was coming soon. According to the previous custom, Ryan would hold a grand banquet in the mansion. I also followed the custom and spent a bit more money to buy Ava a set of jewelry. Seeing Ava pretending to be aloof while unable to hide her ecstasy in her eyes, the corners of my mouth slightly curled up. Let Ava be proud for now. Anyway, she won't be able to stay in the Ryan family for many days. At the banquet, I wore a deep red body-hugging dress, and around my neck was a ruby necklace that my mother just bought from an auction. The main stone was as deep red as blood, looking both dangerous and beautiful. In contrast, Ava wore a lotus root pink cheongsam, with her long curly hair hanging in front of her chest. She looked delicate and pitiful without much makeup. Ryan looked at Ava tenderly, but frowned when his eyes turned to me. I didn't care at all and was touching up my lipstick in front of the mirror. At the banquet, I walked in with Ryan's arm in mine. Everyone looked at each other but no one said a word. I knew that originally it was always Ryan and Ava who appeared together. Now that I, with my bold personality, replaced Ava, they naturally weren't used to it. But then they changed their views on me. When the banquet started, I left Ryan behind and walked around with a glass of wine to socialize. The businessmen who originally looked down on me all smiled and toasted me one after another. After all, now that I'm Mrs. Ryan, they don't dare to offend me. I haven't been working in the business world for nothing all these years. After several rounds of socializing, those arrogant and powerful people also realized that I was quite capable. They all became serious and talked with me. After a few drinks, I excused myself to go to the bathroom and was arranging my hair in front of the mirror. Suddenly, I heard the voices of a few young girls. The girl in the pink dress said to her companions, "I didn't expect that Ava's stepmother is so powerful. She looks like someone you don't want to mess with." Another girl sneered. "So what if she's not easy to mess with? Our families are wealthy enough that we don't have to please her. Yuan's enemy is our enemy. Don't be nice to her." Hearing this, I sneered, finding it really funny. A few little brats who don't know anything yet want to isolate me? You may be from wealthy families in Beijing, but it's not your turn to have a say in your families yet. By the time it's your turn to have a say, I'll already have a firm foothold in Beijing. I don't care who you are, you'll have to cooperate with me. I was too lazy to listen to their catty remarks anymore. I fixed my hair and went back. When I returned to the banquet hall, Ava was already standing beside Ryan. Ryan looked at Ava affectionately. "Today is our Yuan's 18th birthday. I wish our Yuan peace and happiness every day." After saying that, he picked up the crown placed on the cushion and put it on Ava's head. It was an antique that Ryan bought back from an auction and was priceless. A girl standing in the crowd couldn't help but whisper to her companion, "It seems that the Ryan family still values Ava a lot." Ava looked up and saw me, and her gentle face was full of provocation. But I just ignored it. Ava put on a harmless smile. "Mom, what are you going to give me?" With Ryan's generous gift in front, if I didn't give something valuable, people would surely gossip that I was a nouveau riche and stingy. And what's more valuable than antiques is shares. But the corners of my mouth curved into a strange smile, and I clapped my hands with a smile. I yanked off the red cloth. It was a simple letter. Ava opened it with disdain, but her eyes widened in surprise after seeing the content. She looked at me in disbelief. I smiled and looked at her, speaking gently. "Mom knows that you're a good student, have high standards, and are picky about schools. So Mom asked Professor Maxwell to write a recommendation letter for you and recommend you to the law school of the University of Munich. On your 18th birthday, Mom wishes you a bright future and a wonderful life of your own." After saying that, Ava's look at me completely changed. She was born into a wealthy family and was influenced by it since childhood. Although Ryan was important to her, now the offer was more important. What's more, it was a recommendation letter written by Professor Maxwell himself. It was something that Ryan couldn't get even if he visited in person. This time, Ava finally called me mother sincerely. But the smile on my face became even more meaningful. "Go and study at the law school of the University of Munich. Once you start studying there, you'll be too busy to say a word. After all, the 3 years of undergraduate study in Germany will be the most meaningful years in your life in the next 5 years, or even 7 years. When you graduate with great difficulty and come back, I'm sure you'll be so pure-hearted that you won't even have the slightest interest in Ryan. After all, even someone as smart as me had a tough time there and almost couldn't graduate on time. For someone like Ava who has a bit of cleverness but thinks too highly of herself, it'll surely be a tough time for her there." Ava, the silly girl, was still thanking me nonstop. I put on a motherly look and smiled as I accepted her thanks. The banquet hall was filled with a happy atmosphere, except that Ryan and his family members had stiff expressions. I glanced at them. I knew what they were planning. They wanted to keep Ava in the country to oppose me and attract my attention so that I would be distracted by her in the inner house of the Ryan family. By then, they could use my dowry for business activities in the Ryan family without worrying that I would notice. But who am I? How could I be bogged down by personal feelings? A recommendation letter that no one can refuse just shut up the Ryan family and got rid of Ava, this little troublemaker. 07 After getting the recommendation letter, Ava started learning the language. The time left for her was not long, and German was not as easy as she thought. Even though she had a basic knowledge of German before, it was still difficult when she delved deeper into learning it, let alone having to take care of other subjects at the same time. I simply spent a lot of money to hire several high-level tutors for her. They went to the Ryan family's mansion continuously to give her lessons. Ryan watched from the side but couldn't find any fault. He just wanted to let Ava come out to oppose me, but I stopped him with a smile. Husband, now Yuan is at a critical moment. Since you love her, don't delay her at this time. Although I'm not highly educated, I also know that learning is the noblest pursuit. Yuan likes this, isn't it a good thing? After saying that, I stared at Ryan with my eyes curved, making Ryan feel a bit guilty. Especially that phrase, not highly educated, made him look down on me even more. He didn't even bother to know about my background until I took out the recommendation letter from Maxwell at Ava's birthday banquet. Then he became alert. I graduated from the law school of the University of Munich with double degrees in law and finance. During my master's degree, I accidentally met the founder of a certain luxury brand. I found my direction for starting a business, dropped out of school neatly, and founded my own brand. At the age of 28, I owned a huge fortune but kept a low profile. This year, I entered the domestic market. And he, who claimed to be a big shot in the Beijing circle, just got a degree abroad by relying on his family's protection. As soon as he returned to China, he started being idle and keeping a young girl by his side. How could he compare with me? Knowing my background, Ryan's self-esteem was severely hit, and he avoided me all day. I didn't bother to pay attention to him and started to focus on my own career. 08 on Friday night, I invited several suppliers to have dinner together at the club. The environment of the club was nice, the flowing water and the highly skilled zither player made the Jiangnan folk tunes sound so sweet and moving. I bargained with the suppliers back and forth. After several rounds of negotiation, I managed to get what I wanted at the lowest price within their acceptable range. The middle-aged man with a big belly said with a bitter smile, "President Maxwell, it's really difficult to deal with you." I smiled brightly and raised my glass to him. "President Wang, you're flattering me." "The same to you." After a few drinks, I excused myself to go to the bathroom and escaped to take a breath. The view on the rooftop was nice. I was just about to take out my lighter when I heard a familiar voice. It was Ryan and the old lady of the Ryan family. I quickly turned around and hid behind the curtain beside me, listening to their conversation. The old lady, who was usually kind, had a low, hoarse, and cold voice. "Why haven't you done anything to Serena yet? Don't tell me that you can't even deal with a woman." Ryan's voice was extremely irritable. "It's not that I don't want to do it. Serena is too vigilant. She's not an easy target. That 1.5 billion can't be easily obtained by us at all." The old lady snorted. "She's just a woman. How capable can she be? Didn't your sister-in-law used to be a tough nut to crack too? In the end, didn't she give in?" The rooftop suddenly became quiet. The old lady said slowly, "Since she's unwilling to give the dowry, that's easy to say. Turn her into a vegetable. Then all her money will be ours. Just like what we did to your sister-in-law before. Don't tell me that you can't even handle such a small thing." Hearing this, I froze for a moment, and a hint of sarcasm flashed in my eyes. It seemed that the Ryan family wasn't a good family either. When that mother and son left, I was just about to come out when I heard a burst of footsteps. The next second, a gentle voice rang out, "President Maxwell, did you hear those words just now?" I pulled the curtain open and looked up. A tall and slender man was standing in front of me. He was wearing a white shirt with a hidden pattern, a gray sweater and a pair of metal-framed glasses, looking refined. He was the professional manager of the Ryan family group and also the illegitimate son of the Ryan family, Oliver. This illegitimate son, who grew up in the slums before the age of 15 and then entered the wealthy family to make a living, had an amazingly tough character. He struggled in the Ryan family for 3 years, went to study in the United States at the age of 18, and still chose to be loyal to the Ryan family after coming back. I curled the ends of my hair and looked up at him lazily. President Ryan went to great lengths to let me hear these. "What's your intention?" Oliver chuckled and didn't beat around the bush. He frankly stated his ambition. "I want to take over the entire Ryan family. Let's cooperate. After it's done, I'll give you 5% of the Ryan family. And I'll return your investment with principal and interest in full." I looked him up and down and then simply shook his hand. Deal. The reason why I could cooperate with Oliver so easily was quite simple. Oliver's background accounted for most of it. The lecherous and muddle-headed old man of the Ryan family, the domineering and ruthless old lady of the Ryan family, and Oliver's mother who took by force. Plus Oliver, the illegitimate son. Moreover, Ryan had already been unhappy with Oliver's position as a professional manager for a long time. If it hadn't been for the repeated obstruction of the board of directors, Ryan would have removed Oliver long ago. At this point, even if Oliver was originally a person who didn't want to compete with others, he had to fight for himself. What's more, he was an ambitious person. After agreeing to Oliver's cooperation request, I didn't act rashly either. I still went to work and got off work as usual every day. I would put on the airs of a mother to care about Ava, who was so exhausted from studying, and then use harsh words to humiliate Ryan. Ryan was the kind of person who would be tough when you were weak and weak when you were tough. Under my tough policy, he didn't even dare to say a word. It wasn't until I built up the business of the Beijing branch and started to take away a large sum of money from the Ryan family as an investor that the old lady of the Ryan family finally couldn't wait any longer. After I took the money and left, the old lady of the Ryan family slapped the table. In front of a large group of shareholders, she pointed at Ryan's nose and cursed loudly. "How could I raise such a useless son like you?" After saying that, the old lady left with a black face and slammed the door. When Oliver told me all this with a smile, I burst out laughing. After I finished laughing, Oliver picked up the coffee cup on the table and said, "However, President Maxwell, you should be careful. Now that the old lady is angry, it won't be long before they take action against you." I sneered. The Ryan family has fallen into such a poor situation because of their duplicity. So what if I take away 40% of the profits? If it weren't for my investment, they wouldn't get a penny now. After saying that, Oliver nodded. The Ryan family is used to taking advantage. That's just how they are. Be careful now. I have people around the old lady. I'll remind you when she tries to do something to you. After discussing the cooperation, we talked a little more about the details of the cooperation and then went our separate ways. If you want to make someone leave this world reasonably, the methods are quite simple. Poisoning or a car accident. There are two types of poisoning, chronic poison or directly poisoning someone to death. Since I returned to China, I've frequently appeared in the public eye. It would be too obvious to poison someone to death directly. So there's only chronic poison left. But under the current situation, I'm like a sponge absorbing water crazily, expanding my territory every moment. Every day of delay will see the Ryan family's position in Beijing being eroded by me. Chronic poison takes effect too slowly. I'm afraid that before I show any symptoms, the Ryan family will already belong to the Maxwell family. In comparison, a car accident has become the most cost-effective way to get rid of me. Oliver said that the old hag of the Ryan family was best at using car accidents to cover up her crimes. It was because of a car accident planned by the old lady that his mother lost her life. Up to now, although the old lady is still domineering, he is no longer the same as before. Oliver promised me that as long as he received the news, he would surely come to tip me off. After all, I'm now in cooperation with him. The day for the plan to be implemented was coming soon. Previously, in order to enhance Ava's reputation, Ryan specially built an art museum for her and exhibited her oil paintings in it. And this art museum had just been completed. As the owner of the art museum, Ryan naturally had to attend the unveiling ceremony. I had always disliked Ryan and was unwilling to take the same car with him, and this time was no exception. Ava had to study, so only Ryan and I could go. Just before we were about to leave, my secretary made an urgent phone call to me. She said that the originally appointed supplier suddenly raised the price on the spot and asked me to go to the company for negotiations immediately. It was urgent. After answering the phone, I immediately informed Ryan and asked him to leave first. Although Ryan was a bit dissatisfied with this, he didn't dare to say anything due to my authority and could only leave first. The car he usually used was found to have a small problem with its internal system half an hour ago. Ryan thought it was a hint from his mother and obediently changed to the car that I usually took. 5 minutes after Ryan left, I randomly chose a car in the garage and went to the company. The problem with the supplier was real, but I'm not stupid. Things that had been planned in advance were very easy to deal with. An hour later, after I had dealt with the problem of the supplier's betrayal, as soon as I walked out of the meeting room, I received a call from the police. The police said on the phone that my husband Ryan had been in a serious car accident and his brains had been knocked out, asking me to go to the hospital immediately. I immediately said that I would rush to the hospital as soon as possible and asked the doctors to do their best to treat him, regardless of the cost. When I arrived at the hospital, the old lady of the Ryan family had already been waiting at the door of the ward. When she saw me coming, the hatred in her eyes almost became tangible. "Serena, you bitch. Why did you harm my son?" As she said this, she threw herself at me and started hitting me. "He's my only son left. Why did you harm him?" My assistant Becky was strong and pushed her away at once, staring at her with a cold face. "Old lady, we can understand your anxiety when something happened to your son, but don't throw baseless accusations around. Our President Maxwell has just rushed back from the company. How could she have the time to harm your son? On the contrary, the road was so wide. Why did the hit-and-run driver have to hit the car that President Maxwell usually drives?" Becky, trained by me, had a fierce look on her face. Her sharp eyes made the Ryan family members feel guilty and look away. Oliver, who was standing aside, stopped the old lady. "Mother, before the police finish their investigation, you'd better take a good look at brother. It would have been okay if he hadn't said anything." Hearing what Oliver said, Grandma Ryan glared at him viciously. After a while, she slapped Oliver across the face. There was silence all around. Oliver lowered his head without saying a word and gently touched his cheek with his slender fingers. Grandma Ryan sneered. Now that your brother has had an accident, you're the happiest one, right? I'm telling you, if anything happens to Ryan, none of you will get away with it. After saying that, she shook off the servants who were supporting her and walked away with big strides. Oliver and I stood at the door of the operating room, looking at each other without saying a word. The lights in the hospital corridor were flickering. However, I saw a flame-like light in Oliver's eyes. This man was not as docile and easy to bully as he looked on the outside. Ryan originally had an older brother. A few years ago, he was killed in a casino when gambling in the United States. Grandma Ryan was furious and hired the most professional legal team to sue the casino owner, determined to find out the truth about her son's death. However, the casino owner had the support of the local mafia behind him. Moreover, the owner's younger brother was a famous local lawyer. Under the confrontation between the two forces, in the end, because the incident happened in a foreign country, nothing came of it. But if you look deeper into it, you'll find that the same-sex lover of that lawyer was a classmate who had a good relationship with Oliver when he was studying in the United States. Love may not inspire people, but hatred can burst out with powerful strength. Oliver was a man who grew up nourished by hatred. He was like a poisonous snake, lurking for many years and finally killing you with one strike when you weren't paying attention. Such a person is not to be provoked easily. 11 doctors are not gods. A person whose brains have been knocked out surely couldn't survive. After being rescued for more than 10 hours, Ryan was pronounced dead by the doctors. Grandma Ryan almost fainted when she received the news. But it was only almost. Because the police came. The police came to arrest the criminal suspect with the confession of the truck driver who caused the accident. That truck driver wasn't stupid. Grandma Ryan had promised that if he killed me, she would pay the high costs for the treatment of his daughter and mother's genetic diseases. But now he had messed things up. The person he killed was the apple of Grandma Ryan's eye. Now no one would protect him. In order to get a lighter sentence, he confessed quickly. The police immediately arrested Grandma Ryan according to the confession. Grandma Ryan still wanted to show her identity to avoid going to prison. Who knew that the two policemen were newbies and weren't afraid of her at all? Then she became really scared. Her old voice was mixed with fear as she screamed and ran out of the hospital. Oliver and I were sitting in the police station. After finishing the record, we were released. After all this trouble, I was already a bit tired. However, Oliver was still energetic. He finished the record first and somehow changed into another suit of clothes. He was dressed in a suit and tie and had a faint fragrance of perfume on him. I turned to look at him. He pushed the metal-framed glasses on his nose and smiled gracefully. President Maxwell, you'd better go back and rest. When you wake up, I'll return all the shares and the 1.5 billion to you. Looking at his appearance, I knew that after lurking for many years, he was finally going to take back what belonged to him. I didn't care about the mess in the Ryan family. The Ryan family was a mixed bag internally, with countless nephews and nieces. Trying to grab things in such a huge group was no different from trying to snatch meat from a pack of hungry wolves. I had only been in the Ryan family for less than half a year. The Ryan family was like a swamp. Without full preparation, I wouldn't act rashly. What's more, there were still many things to do in my Beijing branch company. Now was not the best time to seize power. As long as I was given the shares and 1.5 billion that I deserved according to the marriage law, I would be satisfied. The luxury car drove towards the Ryan family's mansion. As soon as I got out of the car, I saw Ava waiting at the door with a pale face. When she saw me getting out of the car, she opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something but hesitated. I walked up to her and patted her on the shoulder. Ryan is dead. Ava nodded with difficulty and then looked up at me with a haughty look. School still has to go on. The requirements of the law school of the University of Munich are not ordinary. You still have a long way to go. Study hard. After saying that, I lowered my head and stared into Ava's eyes. As for other things, Ryan didn't leave you anything including shares, trusts, real estate, etc. And legally, you don't have an adoption relationship with him. Ryan didn't have guardianship over you, so you can't get a penny from him. Hearing what I said, Ava's lips turned white in an instant, looking as if she was about to collapse. Originally, Ryan kept Ava just because he wanted to satisfy his desire for a nurturing story and didn't really care about Ava's future. After all, she would have to rely on him in the future. Giving her too many assets would be a bad thing for Ryan. But looking at Ava's appearance, I sighed and turned to look at the lawyer waiting behind me. The female lawyer walked forward, took Ava's hand, and handed her an agreement. The lawyer explained gently. As your stepmother, President Maxwell won't leave you alone. This agreement stipulates that as long as you promise not to participate in the internal struggles of the Ryan family in the future and not to act in the Ryan family under the identity of Ryan's adopted daughter, you will have the right to obtain the following assets. These include all the expenses for your study in Germany, 50 million yuan in cash, and 2 existing houses in Beijing. You can take away all the luxury goods and jewelry that Ryan bought for you." Ava was stunned on the spot and then suddenly looked up at me. I had a calm expression on my face. It's worth spending some money to make sure Ava never enters the Ryan family again. Now Ava doesn't pose a threat, but if someone with ulterior motives acts in the Ryan family in Ava's name in the future, it will also be troublesome. However, if Ava is ambitious and refuses to sign the agreement, I have ways to make her completely leave the Ryan family. After a while, Ava tightly grasped my hand and said eagerly, "I'm willing. I'm willing to sign. Give me the agreement. I'll sign it right away." Hearing her words, I smiled with satisfaction. The jewelry that Ryan bought for her was worth more than 50 million yuan, plus the cash and real estate I gave her. As long as she behaves herself, she won't have to worry about food and drink in Beijing for the rest of her life. 12 During the school season, after sending Ava off, I started to deal with the shares and assets inherited from Ryan. Although this business marriage didn't last long, from a business perspective, I did make a lot of profits. Although Oliver held the majority of the shares, my shareholding was enough for me to enter the board of directors. On the day I went to the Ryan family, I met Oliver. He already looked elegant and greeted me with a smile, inviting me to have a cup of coffee. I agreed. In the coffee shop downstairs of the company, Oliver brought 2 freshly made cups of coffee to me. I took the coffee and smiled. "I thought you would invite me to a more upscale place." Oliver smiled and shook his head, sitting in his seat and looking out of the window. The sunlight shone through the floor-to-ceiling windows onto his face. Although it was a bright arc, I could see a bit of sadness in it. After a while, Oliver said in a daze, "When I was a child and went to school, I once passed by here and saw the white-collar workers working through the window. At that time, I was thinking that I would work here in the future and earn money to support my mother. Later, I became the owner here, but my mother was gone." Hearing him say this, I fell silent. Some time ago, Oliver dug out his mother's case and asked the court to rehear it. He has said that his mother didn't die in an accident but was killed by Grandma Ryan, and the chain of evidence he presented was complete and the facts were conclusive. Grandma Ryan was convicted of intentional homicide and other crimes. With multiple crimes punished together, the worst would be the death penalty, and even the best outcome wouldn't be good. She couldn't escape imprisonment. The old lady had calculated everything all her life, but in the end all her family property fell into the hands of her illegitimate son. I don't know what she would think about it. When Oliver came back to his senses and saw me opposite him, he smiled apologetically, sorry to make President Maxwell laugh. I waved my hand and he continued, "President Maxwell has helped me such a great deal this time. If you have any needs in Beijing in the future, feel free to come to me." The internal struggles in the Ryan family haven't calmed down because of this. Fortunately, I accumulated some connections when I was a professional manager and can barely manage to deal with it. Let's part here. After saying that, he got up and said goodbye to me. When he left, I looked up at the window. In early autumn in Beijing, the sunlight was already bright and the trees were lush and green, still looking prosperous. I had been in Beijing for more than half a year. I developed a new company and entered the board of directors of the Ryan family. My future had just begun.